Hello everyone. I'm a little frustrated over a recent story that's come out regarding transphobia in the workplace, so I thought I'd make a little video about it, and hopefully it might end up clearing up some thoughts I had around the topic, as well as potentially giving some tips to people working in the UK who are feeling uncertain about addressing transphobia in the workplace. So what's got me upset? You may have heard about the Joe Phoenix tribunal that has recently taken place. Fair warning, while I'm relatively familiar with the Equality Act, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm limited in how much I can comment to the specifics of the case. I've had to read about the cases from areas which don't seem to have analysed the result very critically. I will highlight where my reading comes from as we go through, but I would highly encourage everyone to keep an eye out for anything published by the Trans Safety Network, Jess Thompson, or Robin Moira White. I know Robin will be writing a piece in the Employment Lawyers Association briefing entitled Challenging Employees in the Workplace, so definitely keep an eye out for that. I'm mainly approaching the topic today as a person working in equality and diversity, and I'm hoping to summarise some thoughts on the topic and think about what our approach around transphobia in the workplace should be going forward. So what's happened? A tribunal has ruled that the Open University discriminated against Professor Joe Phoenix, resulting in constructive dismissal. The judgment document is extremely long at 150 pages, so I will be focusing on the points that have been most discussed in the media, and we'll start off with describing Phoenix in the workplace. Colleagues first became aware of her views in 2018 when The Guardian published a letter signed by 54 academics, including her, expressing concern about self-identification for gender reassignment. Following this, she spoke in various settings, including Women's Place UK, signing a letter in the Sunday Times raising concern over Stonewall, and discussing a number of anti-trans talking points on podcasts. While working at the Open University, Phoenix had a number of negative experiences from other staff members. The head of discipline in the department told Phoenix that having her in the department was like having a racist uncle at the Christmas dinner table. There was a silence and lack of praise from colleagues when she obtained a $1 million grant for her newly formed group focusing on investigating anti-trans talking points, while another colleague was praised just for making a grant application. And at one point, when a talk on trans people in the criminal justice system was cancelled due to student protests, she was met by silence from colleagues when she told them. In June 2021, Phoenix launched the Gender Critical Research Network. This was criticised by a number of people when it was noted that founding members were all well known for sharing views that negatively impact the rights for trans and non-binary people. People affiliated with this group include Alice Sullivan, who has submitted evidence to the Women and Equalities Committee against reform of the Gender Recognition Act, and Kathleen Stock, who has argued against trans women having access to women's bathrooms. This group went against the Open University's own gender identity policy, which states that staff should respect self-identified gender as well as considering the duty of care staff have to trans and non-binary students. Open University also have a statement of principles on academic freedom, stating that all reasonable efforts should be taken to minimize harm, psychologically or physically, to anyone with conflicting views. A protest letter was written to the Open University asking for the Open University to do three things. 1. Withdraw its public support for and affiliation with the Gender Critical Research Network. 2. To affirm its position as a trans-inclusive employer. And 3. To commit to developing a concrete plan of action for supporting and affirming trans students and staff in this trans-hostile external and internal environment. This was signed by 368 Open University staff and postgraduate researchers. In 2021, Phoenix left the Open University to take up a professional role in the law school at the University of Reading and began a process of bringing a constructive dismissal case against the Open University for not protecting her against harassment in the workplace. The tribunal considered a number of points, and we will go over what was discussed regarding the points I outlined. Regarding the frosty treatment Phoenix received from other staff members, the tribunal found that several of the meeting's attendees were supportive and sympathetic to gender identity views rather than the gender-critical beliefs held by the claimant, and found that Phoenix experienced a detriment due to the silence and a lack of praise, particularly in comparison to the colleague who received recognition for their grant application. Regarding referring to Phoenix as a racist uncle, the tribunal found that Professor Westmoreland knew that this was upsetting for the claimant. The tribunal concluded that its purpose was to violate the claimant's dignity because inherent to the comment is an insult of being put in the same category as racists, which the tribunal said was effectively telling the claimant off for expressing her gender-critical beliefs. Going on to the open letter protesting the gender-critical research network, the tribunal said that the Open University not taking measures to remove the letter had a chilling effect on the claimant expressing her gender-critical beliefs and carrying out gender-critical research. We find that the claimant was not properly provided with effective protection from the effects of the launch of the GCRN. We find that the respondent did not provide the claimant protection, particularly in the form of asking staff and students not to launch campaigns to deplatform the GCRN or make claims to remove support for the claimant's gender-critical research, or use social media to label the claimant transphobic or TERF, trans-exclusionary radical feminist. The respondent failed to protect the claimant because they did not want to be seen to give any kind of support to academics with gender-critical beliefs, including the claimant. The publication of the open letter encouraged a pile-on to the claimant, creating an atmosphere that made it more difficult for the claimant to carry out research from a gender-critical perspective within a network of other colleagues. In summary, the tribunal found that it amounted to constructive dismissal and direct discrimination had occurred. Constructive dismissal means that an employee is put in the position where they feel they have to resign because of something their employer has done, and discrimination means the employer has treated someone less favorably, which is illegal to do when it is because of a protected characteristic, with certain exceptions. Examples include disability, sexuality, gender reassignment, and the most relevant here, religion or belief. So, before I talk any further, I should really emphasize that while it is always a bit unnerving to hear about cases such as this one, it is important to remember that it is of limited legal significance. This took place in an employment tribunal, not a court of law. It does not set a precedent and can be appealed. It doesn't undo what has been established with past cases, and in fact, it might be helpful to go over some of the past cases now. The two cases I will discuss for context will be Maya Forstater versus the Centre for Global Development Europe, and Makareth versus the Department for Work and Pensions. The case that most people will have heard of is Maya Forstater's, which has been through a number of different courts and appeals. This case was about Forstater arguing that her contract was not renewed due to her gender-critical beliefs. While some report that this case establishes gender-critical beliefs as a protected characteristic, that's not quite accurate. Rather, all beliefs are protected under UK law as part of the protected characteristic of religion or belief. But it is legal to discriminate against this if the belief violates the Granger criteria. For example, that the belief is not worthy of respect in a democratic society, or is incompatible with human dignity and is in conflict with the fundamental rights of others. This should prevent racist, sexist, and other bigoted beliefs from being protected under UK law. Forstater's ruling said that gender-critical beliefs did not violate this criteria, which sets the precedent that Forstater's gender-critical beliefs are protected. Anyone wanting to defend against anti-trans rhetoric in the workplace needs to be aware of this, as it means we need to be quite specific when addressing transphobia in the workplace, as we will discuss later. One of the key points of contention in these cases is the difference between having a belief and acting on that belief. As Forstater acted on her beliefs in a few different ways, misgendering and harassing people online while having her company in her bio, bringing in transphobic documents into the workplace, some have taken her winning the appeal as precedent for people to act on gender-critical beliefs for example by misgendering others. It's really important to take away that this is not the case. There are two main aspects of forced status case which don't generalize to other workplaces. Firstly, regarding the activities online, the Centre for Global Development did not have a social media policy, so it was argued that it wasn't clear to employees that they should not engage in such activities online. Secondly, the Centre for Global Development sent some less professional emails which emphasized forced data not having a contract renewed due to the employer's view of her beliefs, rather than as a consequence of her actions. Regarding transphobic actions, the Makareth case highlights the issue quite well. Makareth was a healthcare professional working as a health and disabilities assessor for the Department of Work and Pensions, who would not agree to use clients' preferred pronouns, citing his Christian belief and his gender-critical beliefs. Forced data's appeal is a lower court judgment, whereas this is from a higher court and makes reference to forced data in its decision. This ruling makes it clear that regardless of an individual's belief, it is reasonable for an employer to ask that transgender customers are treated with respect and in accordance with their rights under the Equality Act 2010. This would include avoiding misgendering clients, using non-preferred pronouns, and harassment. My takeaway from these cases are to be clear about what behaviour is or is not acceptable in the workplace when speaking to staff, rather than focusing on beliefs, and the importance of having robust policies on social media, personal conduct, and trans and non-binary staff and clients. So, does the Phoenix case change things? As I said, it was a first-level employment tribunal, so it has very little weight. The main concern is optics, and how this case, with the megaphone given to it by a fleet of journalists keen to trumpet it without full context, can encourage other anti-trans employees to feel more secure in acting bigoted in the workplace, taking employees to tribunal if dismissed for this behaviour, while employers are less likely to feel confident in challenging this behaviour and less likely to appeal tribunal decisions. It's a very frustrating news story. This case seems to suggest that staff members have an obligation to praise and support colleagues, even if they disagree with their actions. I know I wouldn't cheer for a $1 million funding grant going towards supporting a group looking to demonise trans people. Whatever the Gender Critical Research Network claims to be, its members have backed many statements that have no scientific backing and go against what scientific research says. That group establishing itself at a university is terrible. These beliefs of mine are unlikely to be protected, however, as I believe the protected criteria is for a rigorous set of consistent beliefs. Think like a religion or veganism, not just any old thought you have on a topic. That said, you could easily imagine that the existence of the Gender Critical Research Network could result in a hostile environment for a staff member who feels unsafe due to their gender or sexual identity, in which case it could be argued at tribunal that the Open University should have done more to protect staff from the effects of Phoenix's behaviour. This is why the Granger criteria really should exclude gender-critical beliefs. It's just not worthy to a humane society to coddle people who are afraid of trans people with no evidence for their beliefs. But anyway, if the Open University could potentially have been accused of discrimination from both gender-critical and LGBTQ+ staff, what could they have done to prevent discrimination in the workplace? How do you account for both of these groups of people? To answer that question, I've come up with about 5 different points that might be helpful. So, point number 1, avoid labeling staff. Don't say a member of staff is a TERF, is gender critical, a sex realist, or whatever term they're using. Yes, removing the ability to describe prejudice is a tool purposefully being used to limit the conversation, but there have been some clear cases of judges who are either not fully aware of the discourse around transphobic groups, or are biased to those individuals. We have seen in this case criticism for comparing transphobia to racism, and previous cases have treated staff members being referred to as a TERF as evidence of a hostile work environment. This doesn't mean backing down, however. If you call someone a racist uncle, it's easy to see how that could be seen as an insult. But if you draw clear parallels between how their behaviour is harmful to how the behaviour of racists are harmful, that shows you're not responding to their beliefs, but instead highlights the harm of their actions. Don't call people racist uncles. Say that your statements that trans women are a threat are discriminatory and could make some of our staff and students feel unsafe. My next tip: if a staff member displays unacceptable behaviour in the workplace, frame the issue around the behaviour and do not ignore it. In the Phoenix case, it's frustrated that they cited things like people disagreeing with her as a form of bullying, but the counterpoint is that you could argue that the group is hostile to trans and queer communities. The Open University should have made this argument at the time when it was happening. And this case really shows why organisations can't passively support trans rights. They need to be active in their actions. The Maya Forstater case says that gender-critical beliefs don't reach the bar of being unworthy, but it doesn't say that about actions, and the organisation could have talked to Phoenix about her actions. Part of this that's really important: have policies and follow them. Have multiple policies. Have a staff transgender policy, a transitioning at work policy, a policy discussing conduct in the office. All discussions around these topics are best focused on actions, but just focusing on actions is not enough. This needs to be done in a formulated way, as shown by the case between Shara Ali and the Green Party. That case did not find any problem with the Green Party removing Ali due to his views on transgender people, but did find fault with not following procedure to do so. Likewise, in the Open University case, the judge said, "We do not consider that the respondent had a proper reason for allowing the harassment to continue. If they had used a policy as a framework, this could have helped demonstrate the university's reasons for the actions they took." Next up, thinking about wider workplace actions you can take. You can't refuse to hire someone for their beliefs, and you can't fire them because of their belief, but you can make an environment that they do not want to work in. This is not just about promoting equality. This is about promoting equality in a boring way. There are some people who you are never going to convince, and as they try to argue the devil with you, it can be tempting to increase the volatility of your arguments. Don't. Reduce the amount of time you interact with transphobic people and arguments, and instead shift your focus on supporting those who need the support. Work on increasing solidarity between persecuted minorities, and make it clear that when someone attacks trans people, it's an attack on issues that affect all of us. Lastly, I'd say make sure to be aware of these cases. You don't need to be an expert, but have a general understanding of the takeaway messages, how transphobic groups like to spin them, and make sure you feel comfortable disputing those narratives and explaining to others in the workplace. So, those are my top tips. Some final thoughts. There may very well be aspects of the Phoenix case where more clear bias is shown by Open University. We have definitely heard cases of employers just doing stupid things. It's frustrating when this is the case, as it does cause difficulties in the workplace for trans people, and employers in that situation should do everything they can to appeal decisions that conflate poor actions taken by employers with creating a safe space in work for trans people. I should note that there may also be plenty of cases of discrimination against transphobic people getting successfully shot down at tribunal. We just don't hear about them as much, as the media isn't as interested in reporting on this. Unfortunately, this case is another of the trend we see of anti-trans groups using the courts to the fullest extent, as they have a lot of support and funding from far-right groups, and they benefit whether they win the case or not, as their intention is to just get the stories in the news. Conversely, there is little incentive for organisations to appeal, and trans people in the workplace are less likely to have support if they experience discrimination. People like Maya Forstater and Kelly J. Keane have a Scottish billionaire and plenty of GoFundMe donations to fund any legal challenges they fancy, whereas an organisation under fire from the largely anti-trans British media is unlikely to want to prolong its exposure by appealing court decisions. So, I've ranted a little bit and offered my thoughts on what to take from this, which I hope is helpful. But to be honest, I'd like something more to come from this. We keep seeing these cases come up, and it's frustrating seeing the amount of resources transphobes get while the support for organisations to appeal is small. The elephant in the room, of course, is we have all this discussion over discrimination for gender-critical beliefs when we know the amount of discrimination occurring to trans people is massive. If possible, I'd like to help even out the scales. So I'd like to invite people to join together in a group I'm tentatively naming Trans Liberation at Work. My main thoughts are that we need to give trans people the support to challenge employers when discrimination occurs in the same way transphobes do, as well as helping to share support and guidance on dealing with transphobia in the workplace. While we may not have the financial backing, having a group for peer support may help take some of the pressure off. We can help outline information in the Equality Act and compare individual circumstances, refer people to how to make claims, and highlight good employers that people have found welcoming with good policies, staff networks, social supports, etc. It might go nowhere, but I thought I'd try putting it together to see if it would be of any help. Please share the invite for the Discord group in the description with those who would be interested. I'm not very good at using Discord, so if you would be interested in helping run the space at all, do get in touch, as I don't really know what I'm doing. Thank you all very much for listening. I've been Rebecula, and will continue to do so. This group went against the Open University's own gender identity policy, which states that staff should... Wow. Why is it not working? This is so annoying. This is a mess of a sentence.